Hi guys, it's Abby with the Bead Place, and today I'm going to show you how to make a really easy arm knitted cowl. So I have some thick yarn. I'm just using this bright single color to make it easy for you to see what I'm doing. When you make your cowl, you might want to go for something a little thicker or hold multiple yarns together. One of our customers who was at the shop for the arm knitting workshop did something very clever. Her name's Sandy, and what she did was she took all of her yarns and crocheted them together into a chain to make it easier for her to do the arm knitting without losing any of her threads. So that's one tip. If you find it difficult to work with multiple yarns held together, you can crochet them together, and then they're one single piece for you to work with. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start with a slip knot. So how I do that is I make a little cross in my yarn like this, and then I bring my tail, or actually my working yarn, up through that loop. So basically it's a knot with your working yarn going through it, and so that creates a slip knot. So I'm going to count that as my first cast on stitch. Now there are many ways to cast on in knitting. I'm going to show you the easiest way that I think would be best for beginners. So I'm going to take the yarn and make a loop and then put my arm through it. So take the yarn, make a loop, and then put my arm through it. And so you want to keep your stitches straight. I recommend pushing your sleeves up when you're working on this and not wearing any bracelets. The reason why I'm not doing that is because I need you to see the contrast between the black of my sleeve and the hot pink of the yarn. So again, I'm going to take the yarn, make a loop, and then string it on my arm. So I'm going to do 6 stitches. You can do a skinnier cowl or a thicker cowl, just change the number of stitches that you're working on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more for 6. Alright, so notice how all of my stitches are hanging kind of loose. I'm doing that just so it's easier for you to see, but you might want to keep a little tighter tension than that. You don't want to have it so tight though that you cannot pass your arm through it. So what we're going to do today is basically a twisted knit stitch. A lot of arm knitting tutorials will show you how to do a regular knit stitch, but I find that when you have a loose gauge, a twisted stitch helps it from kind of stretching out as much. If this is all a little bit over your head, don't worry about it at all. Just do what works best for you. So I find the twisted stitch is a little bit easier to learn, and when you're doing arm knitting, chances are you're not going to do any complicated lace patterns anyway, so it won't really matter too much if your stitches are twisted. But just pay attention to the way that you're entering the stitch if you're concerned about that. So what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to pass my arm through this first stitch like this. I'm going to grab the yarn from down below and then take this stitch off and let it fall. So what I just grabbed is going to be my new stitch, and I'm going to put it on this arm. So I still have my working yarn hanging from what's on this arm. So again, I'm going to take this arm, bring it through the stitch, grab the yarn, and let that stitch fall off. So then this stitch is my new stitch, and make sure they stay on your arm and they're not kind of hopping over one another. So far I have 4 stitches on my original working needle and then 2 stitches here. So again, what I'm going to do is take this arm, put it through this stitch, grab the working yarn, this is the yarn coming from the ball, pull it through, let this stitch fall off, and then this becomes my new stitch. So again, I'm going to move these stitches a little closer to my hand so it's easier for you to see. Go through this last stitch, and in this hand I'm holding my working yarn. I'm going to go through this last stitch, grab my working yarn, and let that stitch fall off. Then this new stitch goes on this arm. 2 more. We're going to go through, grab, let it fall off, and this becomes our new stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we have this last stitch, which is what we started with. That's our slip knot. We're counting that as a stitch. We're going to go through, grab, and let it fall off. So this is what we should have so far. Now, when you do this, you might want to keep a little bit tighter tension, but you can see if you have, if you kind of know what the knit stitches look like in a knit fabric, you can see that what we have is those loops going through loops, just like what we normally do in knitting, but our stitches are just a little twisted, and that's going to help it stop stretching, and it's just going to make it a little easier for us to work with. So now we're going to do the same thing in reverse. So I'm going to kind of scooch my chair this way so it's easier for you to see. So I have my working yarn in my working needle, hand, and I'm going to put my arm, my empty arm, through the last stitch, grab the working yarn, and drop that last stitch off. So this becomes my new stitch. Again, pull it off and put the new stitch on. And you can kind of keep tension that's comfortable for you. Just know it's going to affect the look of your piece. So if it's loose, when you're working with it, it's going to be a little bit more lacy and loopy. If it's tighter, of course it's going to be more like a fabric rather than a net. So we're doing the same thing, only in reverse. And your end stitches are going to just naturally want to be a little bit looser, so try to pull them tight to correct that. So we have this knitted fabric so far. We could probably make a hammock out of this if we did it wide enough. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is go through these stitches and just let you watch, and then I'm going to pause and we're going to come back and show you how to finish it off. So you can get going really fast at this once you get the hang of it. But basically we're just doing the same thing that you do when you knit a fabric, only you're using your fingers to help you achieve it rather than the points of the needle. And if you're concentrating on not twisting your stitches, then just pay attention to the way or the direction that you put your stitches on your hand. But if you are not concerned, don't worry about that. So you see how my tension is just getting tighter as I go? That's totally fine. You're not really going to pay attention to it at all. But see how if I keep it on my wrists like this rather than up my arm, you can go a little bit faster. So this is what I have so far. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute and I will show you how to finish it off. Alright guys, I'm back. I've created a knitted fabric that I think is going to be long enough for me to make a scarf or a cowl. And so I'm going to show you how to cast it off. So basically, if you have knowledge of casting off and knitting, that's going to be fantastic. If you don't, no problem. It's going to be super easy for you. So what we're going to do is complete the first 2 stitches just like we normally would. So I'm going to go through and put the stitch on my other hand, go through, put the stitch on my other hand, and here's where it changes. What I'm going to do is take this first stitch and I'm going to take it over the second stitch and just let it fall off. Just like that. So now I have 1 stitch. So I'm going to do this next stitch on this arm, take it over, create a new stitch, and let this come over to this hand just like we normally would. I'm going to take the first stitch and let it go over and fall off. So now again we have 1 stitch. So I'm going to continue on this arm. I'm going to go through, let it fall off, take my new stitch, and again I'm going to take this first stitch, take it over, and let it fall off. So 2 more. We're going to go through just like we normally would and take that new stitch over to this hand. Then I'm going to take this stitch over and let it fall off. So we're kind of creating a finished edge here. As you can see, we've got a finished edge of our fabric, just like this. So 1 more. What we're going to do is take this last stitch bring the yarn through it, and take this over it, and let it fall off. So we're left with one stitch. What we're going to do is take a scissors, and we're going to cut a long enough piece that we can sew the two ends together. So when in doubt, cut longer than you think you'll need. So I have a piece a little bit longer than my arm outstretched. So I'm going to take this end and thread it through that last loop, and then we have a finished edge, just like this. So now we're going to find our beginning end, and we're going to basically just whip stitch the two ends together. Or if you'd like, you can just leave it like this, and it's a cute scarf. But I'm going to show you my favorite way to whip stitch the two ends together. So remember the number that you used to start out with. So my number was 6. What I'm going to do is locate 6 little loops on the end here. I'm going to take my end, this is the end that I finished with, I'm going to take the end yarn and loop through the first stitch. Then I'm going to take the end that I started with and find 6 stitches. So usually the end that you start with is going to be a little bit more loose, and that's okay. So I found my first loop. I'm going to go through that loop as well. So then on the end that I finished with, I'm going to find my second loop and pass my yarn through that one. It can be a bit confusing, but don't let it be too difficult because it really doesn't matter. This is going to be hidden behind your neck. So go through the second loop and pull it tight, and then find your second loop on your cast on edge, which I have, and I will go through just like this. And so you can start to see how it's basically stitching the two edges together. I'm going to locate my third loop on my finishing edge. Where'd it go? There it is. And I'm going to locate the third loop on my starting edge, and here it is. And you're going to basically continue like that until it's sewn together. Now you'll notice that you have a lot of leftover yarn. What I recommend doing is kind of reinforcing and doubling back through where you're stitching it together. And basically what that does is it's just going to create a little bit more of an even transition. Since one side generally is going to be a bit more loose than the other, it basically just creates a little bit more of a substantial finish and just looks a bit nicer. Now, if this is a little bit too mind-blowing for you and you're finding it difficult to find the loops, especially if you are not familiar with a knitted fabric, what you can do is just wing it and tie your beginning end and your tail end together, and then basically just bind your tail ends around both sides and just coil it around. And that will hold as well. When in doubt, if you are working with thicker yarn or if your yarn is slick, what you can do is add just a bit of glue to the ends if you're unsure if it's going to hold. That's kind of, don't tell anyone in the yarn world that I told you to do that, because that's kind of a no-no, but I really don't care. So I've sewn through, and what you can do is kind of basically wiggle the yarn around until you are happy with the way that it is laying. And then you can tie your two ends together if you have tail ends from each side. And then you have, you have a arm knitted scarf. So don't be discouraged if you find that you have to start it over a couple times. In the class that we taught at the store, I would say that most of our students, once they got the hang of it and they learned the stitches, they had to start over in order to get tension that they liked. And if you like the kind of lacy, netty look of just one yarn, go for it. If you want to combine bunches of yarns together in order to get a more solid fabric, by all means, go for it. So thanks for watching. I hope you have fun. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below or check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/thebeadplace. And our website is www.beadplace.net. So thank you again for watching and have a fun time trying it.